I sacrificed my college for my dad's recovery, but after years of me traveling to him, he ghosted me for 3 months. It's exhausting. Hello, everyone. I am new to this subreddit and seeking advice to determine if anyone can provide perspective on my relationship with my father and how I might assist him without compromising my own well-being. Should I still pursue a close connection with him? I would appreciate respectful feedback on whether I am overreacting regarding this situation. To provide some context, my father has never gone silent on me like this before. We were very close and used to communicate through phone calls or FaceTime for at least 3 hours each week. 7 years ago, I relocated from my hometown, a decision prompted by the need to drop out of college to care for my father and his 4 cats for 6 months while he healed from a sports injury caused by marijuana use, which required surgery. I chose to leave school to support him until he could manage on his own again. I made that decision out of love, demonstrating patience throughout the 6 months and taking on responsibilities with minimal complaints. I made significant sacrifices to ensure he was comfortable and on the path to recovery. He was wary of any nurses visiting his home, given his concerns about valuable possessions and the potential for theft. I understood his skepticism, as I have my own reservations about the people in that area. Ultimately, after he recovered and I was preparing to leave, I never asked him for anything except his assurance that we would stay close and communicate frequently, avoiding petty disputes or ghosting one another. He agreed. Despite his negative traits, we are quite similar, which has kept us close. During that time, school was my anchor while living in that city, and my constant engagement with coursework made it more tolerable. I intended to leave the city right after graduating, but having to withdraw from school meant my move to a different state was hastened due to the burdensome circumstances of no longer being a student. To this day, my father remains in that city, and witnessing the emotional toll life takes on him is profoundly distressing. Though he has always been loving and kind, he now tends to dwell in negativity, frequently going on rants about how much he despises his life and becoming agitated over politics, despite me having repeatedly expressed my disinterest in discussing political matters throughout the years. He never curtails his commentary and shares the most disheartening thoughts I have ever encountered. I endure these conversations out of love and because he lacks anyone else to confide in. He unloads everything onto me without knowing how to rein it in. Even when I attempt to steer the dialogue toward lighter topics, he invariably drags it back to his negativity. The last time I visited him was on his birthday 4 months ago. It took me 7 hours to reach him. I'm always the one making the journey to see him, as he has never made time to visit me despite being fully capable since he does not work, is in his late 50s, and has no obligations. His excuse for not visiting or engaging in any meaningful activities is that he cannot leave his 4 cats unattended, and he refuses to travel with them due to a single negative experience he had with a kennel worker 15 years ago who failed to administer medication to one of his cats. Prior to my arrival for his birthday, we had planned a fun outing. My father mentioned 4 days before my trip that he had coordinated with his equestrian friend who owns a ranch, informing him of my visit that weekend. His friend had agreed that we could come to the ranch for horseback riding and spend some time together. I thought, fantastic, my father is taking the initiative. I will drive, and he will plan the activities. After our time at the ranch, I will take him out for dinner. This will be enjoyable. Unfortunately, when I arrived, I discovered that my father had not spoken to his friend about any plans, and nothing had been arranged. It turned out his friend was out of town, so our horseback riding plans fell through. My father attempted to organize this at the very last minute, the day I arrived. I found his reasoning baffling, as he had previously met this individual and had been invited to his ranch. His friend had asked my father to contact him in advance to make arrangements, but my father did not do so. We had been trying to plan this ranch visit for a few months, and he dropped the ball, waiting until I was already there, and I could only stay for 2 days. We ended up not going. It was too late, as his friend had no idea I would be in town that weekend. Despite my disappointment and confusion, I masked my feelings and accepted that this visit would be uneventful, without anyone putting thought into what we might do together. I am not one to remain indoors on a beautiful day, so I had to coax him away from his cats in order to take him out for lunch to celebrate his birthday. He had made no other arrangements, and I wanted, for once, to capture some good memories and bond with him through enjoyable activities. Unfortunately, we remained at his house, watching mindless YouTube videos because he preferred to stay in. He is aware that I have become allergic to his cats due to reduced exposure, yet he stated it was fine that we were at his home because he wanted to ensure the cats were not alone for too long. He even suggested, on the positive side, you can spend more time with the cats. Yes, I drove 7 hours to hang out with cats. He offered me the option of sharing a pipe or taking an edible, which made me realize his mental health had sunk to a new low. Although I usually do not feel this way, I was deeply offended, having driven 7 hours to see him and participate in the activities we had planned. What frustrated me further was that he had a meltdown a couple of months prior just because I took a weekend trip for myself to Georgia. When I related this to him, I expected he would be pleased for me. To my astonishment, he was furious. He stated, "You need to prioritize seeing me. I wanted to accompany you to Georgia. Additionally, I haven't seen you in months. You could have gone to Georgia after our visit." To be fair, I hardly take trips for myself. Between working and attending college, the 3.5-hour road trip was a rare treat. His outburst perplexed me because we had already made plans for my birthday visit, and I could not comprehend why he reacted this way. Internally, I thought, if I put my life on hold waiting for him to join me on trips or to do anything beyond the confines of his home, I would grow old waiting. I say this because he remains home with his cats constantly, unable to leave them for more than 2 hours. Why would he even think we could travel or do anything together? He neither cares to plan anything nor has he ever traveled for himself. When one of his cats passes away, he simply replaces it with a new one, usually a younger cat. Based on his reasoning and the way he has structured his life around his pets, it seems he will be confined to caring for them for the next 12 years, I suppose. Frankly, I am exhausted from visiting him once or twice a year, only for him to exhibit no reciprocity or thoughtfulness in organizing those rare occasions when we see each other, ensuring that they are special. Shortly after returning home from celebrating my father's birthday, we were on a call one day when he launched into another political tirade, and his depressive state had worsened significantly. Nevertheless, I remained patient. After we hung up, I did not hear from him for 3 months. There was no explanation, aside from him mentioning a month into his silence that one of his cats had died. 2 months passed with no communication. My birthday arrived without a single call or text from him acknowledging the occasion. I received no Christmas greetings whatsoever. I understand that the loss of his cat can be quite devastating, given my love for animals, but is it unreasonable to expect a birthday message from my own father? Last week, he called 4 days consecutively, providing no explanation for his absence, no apologies for missing my birthday, nothing at all. I cannot ascertain if the death of his cat is the real reason for his neglect towards me for 3 months, but I have come to realize I do not care. My mother treated me similarly years ago, and she and my father exhibit comparable personalities and mental health issues that require professional intervention. This behavior was beginning to affect me, and I refuse to endure it anymore. I am a daughter, not a therapist. Because my mother abandoned me after a month of silence from my father, I had already accepted that he had also decided to sever ties, and I came to terms with it. Now I find myself in a perplexing mental space. I do not wish to engage with him. My mother is just as negative, and I have discovered that my life improved significantly when I was not obligated to hear from him 3 times weekly, subjected to his incessant monologues about his despair. It may sound harsh, but during the 15 years that I did so willingly, I failed to recognize the psychological toll it was taking on my mental health. Being an empath, experiencing his negativity is exhausting for my spirit and mind. On the rare occasions when I was busy and had to skip a week of talking to him, he would resort to passive-aggressive comments during our next conversation, pretending to jest while knowing he was serious if a week lapsed without contact. I would call him the following week, and he would say, "Who is this? Oh my gosh. What year is it now?" He made it seem like months had passed without communication. It was only a week. These comments were demoralizing and hurtful. They led me to feel I was never enough, and I have never enjoyed our long, depressing discussions. They drained me, often leaving me in tears for hours following our phone calls, or so spiritually exhausted that I struggled to find the motivation to do anything. It is almost akin to energy transference. I would appreciate any guidance or advice based on personal experiences you may have had. Reddit removed my previous post solely due to how I expressed my question. For context, I am a 33-year-old female, and my father is a 59-year-old male. To summarize, my father never travels the 7 hours to visit me, and despite the sacrifices I made for him when I lived in close proximity, he has never made an effort to see me after I relocated, nor has he put any consideration into planning activities during my infrequent visits twice a year. I consistently make the 7-hour journey to see him, while he remains at home, frequently high, and forgets to follow through on commitments he has made. He has always been a notably negative individual, albeit with a good heart, yet has struggled with chronic depression throughout his life without seeking help. Instead, he confides in me, as I am one of the few individuals he trusts. After I celebrated his birthday, he cut off communication for 3 months without explanation, neglecting to acknowledge my birthday and only recently reaching out again. I find that I am simply happier without the weight of his negativity. He prioritizes his cats above everything else in his life, and although I acknowledge the responsibilities that come with pet ownership, he has developed an unhealthy codependency with them, making it difficult for him to leave his home except for necessary errands. He does not travel for himself, does not engage with people, and is increasingly becoming socially isolated and paranoid from spending all his time at home caring for his cats. I believe that his relationship with his cats, among other factors, contributes to his marijuana dependence and other barriers to our relationship. Is this relationship salvageable? Has it already ended? Story 2. I let my bosses run the show, and my cashier's breaks were an hour late. Realized compliance only hurt my team. I quit that day. For context, I am currently the head cashier at Home Depot. I am employed at a high-traffic store that recently remodeled the front end, which is where our registers are located. A couple of months ago, our central checkout transitioned to entirely self-checkout registers, referred to as self-checkout, SCO. Although it is SCO, it is labeled assisted, SCO, and they expect us to assist customers as much as possible, particularly with transactions involving 6 or more items, high-priced items, and anything that could potentially conceal items within. Additionally, there is pressure to promote credit card applications. Now, here is where a significant problem arises. Cashiers have not been encouraging enough credit card applications, resulting in us falling short of our goals. Last week, to compensate for this, my supervisor instructed us that she wanted everyone physically stationed at a register, including head cashiers. We are not even allowed to check the schedule to manage breaks or send cashiers home, even though overtime is prohibited. Unless there is cash to handle, we are required to remain at the registers. I am sure some of you can relate to how frustrating this situation is. It is essentially a self-checkout experience. I have noticed more customers becoming upset with our constant assistance than we did when the transition to SCO first occurred. At that time, many customers expressed frustration over the lack of standard registers in the main area of the store. There are only 2 or 3 standard registers open at either end of the store. My fellow head cashiers and I were not in agreement with being confined to a register at all times. We prioritized understanding when to send breaks and when to send cashiers home, even at the risk of disciplinary action. Today was Black Friday, and my supervisor, along with the store manager and several other managers, was constantly lurking nearby. A few actually assisted, which was appreciated, but I digress. The other day, I informed my supervisor about the difficulty of managing breaks and directing the line, as most customers do not walk to an available register, even when self-checkout is empty. She told me to figure it out, stating that if I needed to keep my head on a swivel to check out customers while reducing wait times, then that was my responsibility. So I allowed them to take charge. I stayed at a register and complied with the order. I only left when instructed to cover for someone going home or to take a bathroom break. My lunch ended up being 2 hours late. I remained silent until an hour and a half had passed because I often don't receive my breaks on time, but I am required to take my lunch, as no overtime is permitted. However, my lunch was not the only break that was delayed. When I finally took my lunch, one of my cashiers returned from the bathroom, and we both realized that his 15-minute break had been nearly an hour late. I apologized, explaining that I had not been allowed to check the schedule, or else I would have sent him on his break sooner. I encouraged him to take his break, but advised him to double-check with our supervisor to ensure that two people leaving simultaneously would not be an issue. When I returned from my lunch, I discovered that one of our full-time cashiers had been forgotten while manning one of the few standard registers and was accumulating overtime. This oversight would not have occurred if I had been present, as she leaves at the same time every day, but I had been on my lunch for 2 hours. Later, I was assigned to the garden area to cover a lunch that was over half an hour late. Upon returning inside, another cashier called in because his 15-minute break was also over half an hour late, nearly 45 minutes behind. That is just a glimpse of what transpired. I was unable to perform my job, which resulted in my cashiers being overlooked due to the lack of priority. Even with all of this, we received just as many credit card applications as we had the previous week before we were mandated to constantly be at the registers. It is not about being stationed at the register, it is about making the requests in general. I may not enjoy it, but I comply because it is part of my job. Or at least it used to be. After witnessing the negative impact of not being able to perform my duties due to nonsensical rules on my cashiers today, and receiving a callback from another job, I decided to submit my 2-week notice. It was an affirmation of my choice after an extremely disappointing day. However, I feel relieved. I am leaving what some refer to as Hell Depot, and could not be happier. My only concern is for my cashiers, who will likely continue to struggle under these new rules and regulations, especially if anyone above them adheres to these measures without exception. In summary, I was instructed to behave as a typical cashier, so I allowed my supervisor and managers to take control. Almost everyone's breaks were overlooked for a minimum of 30 minutes, and they neglected to send someone home. But hey, I'm just a cashier. Oh wait, I'm not. Late edit, I apologize for the delay in responding. Life became a bit chaotic for a while. I want to clarify that I was a head cashier. While my position was part of management, even if it was lower level, my responsibilities as the head cashier meant I was responsible for many of the tasks my bosses were undertaking on Black Friday. They should have been able to complete these tasks without issues. Their indifference was concerning. Despite some unremarkable events during the first 2 weeks I stayed, I did extend my time by another week for personal convenience. Notably, throughout my remaining time, my store manager did not speak a word to me. He typically greeted me, if not anyone else, so I believed the backlash had settled down until about a week and a half in. My supervisor proposed yet another nonsensical suggestion for our operations, though she rarely came around to understand the workflow. She suggested that we sign into the SCO registers and treat them as standard registers. Even though the system does not accept cash in that mode, it effectively blocks access. We discovered this when one of our cashier's credentials failed for a single day. I explained to her why it would not be feasible, and I assumed that would end the discussion. It did not. In my final week, 2 other head cashiers informed me that my supervisor was scrutinizing nearly every little action I took and attempting to misconstrue them. This was particularly ironic, since she was aware that I was likely to leave due to the lengthy commute and the physically demanding nature of the job. Despite being mentally checked out, I made an active effort to improve because I dislike feeling unproductive. I maintained open communication with her continuously, and although Black Friday tested our relationship, it did not ruin it entirely. I was simply frustrated with her approach, as I had been in her position before and found her work ethic lacking. I could comment positively on her customer service, at least. However, just before I was set to leave, she and another supervisor from her group displayed unprofessional behavior. I do not wish to delve into the details further, as I prefer to move on from the situation. I made a minor mistake that day and apologized personally to the other supervisor, but she refused to engage with me. This level of maturity was striking, but everyone who learned about the incident agreed that both she and the other supervisor should not have held their positions. It was quite surreal, but honestly, I did not let it get to me since my final shift was right around the corner. It has been several weeks since my departure. The holidays have come and gone, and I sincerely hope you all had pleasant celebrations. I am doing well, gradually feeling less anger as I consider myself a generally passive person. This post may not reflect my usual demeanor, but it was an enjoyable experience nonetheless. I appreciated many of the conversations that unfolded, but I discontinued my replies because I found myself spending too much time online, which is uncharacteristic for me. I typically engage with Reddit occasionally, and I have removed most of my social media for the sake of my mental health. This platform offered a welcome opportunity to vent and engage in meaningful conversation. If you were one of those individuals, I want to express my gratitude. Sincerely, I wish you all fulfilling lives, and please remember to treat your customer service representatives with kindness.